Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another morning of Sutta study with Bhante Suddazo. Today we will be studying Majjhima Nikaya 9, the Sammādiṭṭhi Sutta. Sounds great. And welcome from Ella from Poland, Gita, Ethan, Jens. Thanks for reminding us it's true. Thanks, Jens. Good morning to everyone and dedicating merit in remembrance of Memorial Day. Yes, today is Memorial Day. Welcome to Kevin, Edward, Bradley, Liz, Mark, and Scott. All right. And there is a link to the Sutta, the Sammādiṭṭhi Sutta, on the top of the live chat, I believe. Yes. And I'll just pass it on to Bhante now.
Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato asambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Well, good morning, friends. So as mentioned, today we'll be looking at the Sammādiṭṭhi Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 9. So this is a sutta in which Sariputta gives some explanation about what Sammādiṭṭhi is. So Sammādiṭṭhi is commonly translated as right view. So it's composed of two words. The first word is Samma, and Samma can have a number of different meanings. So commonly it's translated simply as right in the sense of correct, but it also has the meaning of thorough, all around, like all encompassing. It also has the meaning of peaceful. It also has the meaning of harmonious. So Samma has a variety of meanings there. So it also has the meaning of something that's morally correct, as well as something that is factually correct. And the word ditti comes from the verb root dis, which means to see. So ditti literally means seen. So how you see things. So your ditti is your view, your perspective, your belief system, your opinion about things. So ditti, in the suttas, we speak about two kinds of ditti, two kinds of viewpoints or opinions or perspectives. Sammādiṭṭhi, which is correct, accurate perspective, of correct understanding of the world, a viewpoint which is in line with Dhamma, a viewpoint which is peaceful, harmonious, leads towards awakening. And micchā-ditti, which is wrong view, wrong perspective, a distorted viewpoint of the world, a belief about the world which is incorrect, which is inaccurate. And often in the sutta, we see ditti used simply by itself. And when ditti is used by itself without either samma or miccha in front of it, ditti by itself usually automatically means a rigid adherence to a viewpoint. So it defaults to the negative sense of the word. But here, this is a whole sutta about right view, right perspective, the correct, harmonious understanding which leads to awakening. And a number of places in the suttas it says right view comes first. So there's this strong emphasis on the primacy of right view, on the necessity of right view as being a foundation for effectively practicing Dhamma. So without right view, it's extraordinarily difficult to understand Dhamma, extraordinarily difficult to practice Dhamma, extraordinarily difficult to even see any benefit to trying to practice Dhamma. So over the years, I've met lots and lots of people who had lots of wrong view and very little right view, and their practice stagnates very quickly. They might be meditating every day, but they very quickly hit a wall where they're unable to make further progress. And that's usually directly connected to holding wrong view rather than right view. So right view is extremely important. So as usual, I'll start reading through the sutta and periodically give explanations. This is quite a long sutta, so we won't get through all of it today. And we might not even get through all of it in 2 days, but I'm going to try. So as usual, I'll read through the sutta and explain from time to time. The sutta begins. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Sammādiṭṭhi in Jeta's Grove at Anathapindika's park. There, Venerable Sariputta addressed the monks. Venerable monks. Venerable, those monks replied to Venerable Sariputta. Venerable Sariputta said this. So this discourse is given by Venerable Sariputta. Even though the Buddha was there, it was Sariputta who gave this talk. And we see this throughout the suttas. In many, many places, the Buddha mentions that Venerable Sariputta would give Dhamma talks to help instruct the other monks. There were a lot of monks. It was a bit much for the Buddha to personally instruct all of them. So he would get Sariputta and Moggallana to help, as well as other well-established monastics. So Sariputta said this, Venerables, it is said, right perspective, right perspective. Venerables, how does a noble disciple have right perspective? How is one's perspective upright? How is one possessed of certainty and confidence in the Dhamma? How is he one who has arrived at this true Dhamma? And they reply, Venerable, we might come from far away to learn the meaning of this statement in the presence of Venerable Sariputta. It would be excellent if Venerable Sariputta would make evident the meaning of this statement. After hearing it from Venerable Sariputta, the monks will remember it. In other words, we're going to memorize whatever you say now. He says, therefore, Venerables, listen and carefully pay attention. I will speak. Yes, Venerable, those monks replied to Venerable Sariputta. Venerable Sariputta said this. Venerables, when a noble disciple understands the wholesome, when a noble disciple understands the unwholesome, understands the root of the unwholesome, understands the wholesome, and understands the root of the wholesome, this is how a noble disciple has right perspective. How one's perspective is upright, how one is possessed of certainty and confidence in the Dhamma, and how one has arrived at this true Dhamma. But Venerables, what is the unwholesome? What is the root of the unwholesome? What is the wholesome? And what is the root of the wholesome? And he says, Venerables, killing living beings is unwholesome. Theft is unwholesome. Sexual misconduct is unwholesome. False speech is unwholesome. Malicious speech is unwholesome. Harsh speech is unwholesome. Frivolous prattle is unwholesome. Covetousness is unwholesome. Ill will is unwholesome. Wrong perspective is unwholesome. Venerables, this is called the unwholesome. And Venerables, what is the root of the unwholesome? Greed is a root of the unwholesome. Hatred is a root of the unwholesome. Delusion is a root of the unwholesome. Venerables, this is called the root of the unwholesome. And Venerables, what is the wholesome? Abstinence from killing living beings is wholesome. Abstinence from theft is wholesome. Abstinence from sexual misconduct is wholesome. Abstinence from false speech is wholesome. Abstinence from malicious speech is wholesome. Abstinence from harsh speech is wholesome. Abstinence from frivolous prattle is wholesome. Non-covetousness is wholesome. Non-ill will is wholesome. Right perspective is wholesome. Venerables, this is called the wholesome. And Venerables, what is the root of the wholesome? Non-greed is a root of the wholesome. Non-hatred is a root of the wholesome. Non-delusion is a root of the wholesome. Venerables, this is called the root of the wholesome. Venerables, when a noble disciple understands the unwholesome in this way, the root of the unwholesome in this way, the wholesome in this way, and the root of the wholesome in this way, then having completely abandoned the subconscious tendency towards passion, having removed the subconscious tendency towards aversion, having destroyed the subconscious tendency towards the conceit I exist, having abandoned ignorance, having given rise to gnosis, wow, that's a word I don't commonly use in translation, vijja, knowledge, true knowledge. He has made an immediately visible end of dissatisfaction. It's an end of dukkha. This, venerables, is how a noble disciple has right perspective. So here, Sariputta is starting off with emphasizing morality. So once again, morality is the basis of the Buddhist path. Virtuous conduct is the basis of the Buddhist path. So Buddhism doesn't start with meditation. It starts with morality. Morality is the foundation of our practice. And so what he gives here is what's called the 10 kinds of wholesome conduct, which is slightly different from the 5 precepts. So it has 4 of the 5 precepts, and then it expands on that with some more explanation of speech. So it adds in 3 more aspects of speech, and then it adds covetousness, ill will, and wrong perspective. So clarifying a bit more things beyond merely the precepts, which are in the category of unwholesome conduct. So one can follow the 5 precepts, but still be engaging in other forms of unwholesome or harmful behavior. So Sariputta is giving a more complete list. Still not an exhaustive list, of course, because we're very creative in finding ways to do unwholesome things. So then he points out the roots of the unwholesome. What is it that leads to us engaging in unwholesome conduct? Well, it's greed, hatred, and delusion, which in Buddhism we say this so often, greed, hatred, and delusion, that it has a tendency to become a buzzword, like a phrase which we just repeat without really reflecting on its meaning. But actually, we should really think about this. Greed, what do we mean by that? This wanting for things, wanting for experiences, wanting for particular phenomena. And hatred, this dislike of things, this rejection of experiences. And delusion, this misunderstanding of reality, this unwillingness to face reality on its own terms. These are things which we really need to constantly examine. The Buddha says that all unwholesome things arise from these 3 roots, greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's interesting that Sariputta says that if somebody understands these 10 modes of wholesome conduct, then that allows one to completely destroy one's underlying tendencies and attain enlightenment. So he's also emphasizing here that, once again, morality is not something that you do in the very beginning and then get past, but morality, if practiced properly, can lead all the way to full enlightenment, as long as it's morality accompanied by right view. So then the monks say, "Excellent, Venerable." After delighting and rejoicing in Venerable Sariputta's speech, they asked him a further question. "But, Venerable, can there be another way that a noble disciple has right perspective? Has upright perspective, is possessed of certainty and confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma?" And he replies, "There can be, Venerables. Venerables, when a noble disciple understands nutriment." So this is the word ahara, which we spoke about in the sutta yesterday, which in the sutta yesterday I translated it as food. On other occasions, it's translated as sustenance, which I think is a quite good translation, sustenance. I think Bhante Sujato translates it as fuel, which is also pretty good. So when a noble disciple understands nutriment, the origin of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the practice which leads to the cessation of nutriment, this is how a noble disciple has right view, right perspective. And he says, but what is nutriment, the origin of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the practice which leads to the cessation of nutriment? Venerables, there are these four nutriments for beings who have come to be, or for assisting those who seek existence. What for? Physical food, whether coarse or subtle, sense contact, mental volition, and consciousness. From the arising of craving, there is the arising of nutriment. From the cessation of craving, there is the cessation of nutriment. And it is just this Noble Eightfold Path that is the practice which leads to the cessation of nutriment. Namely, right perspective, right intention, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Venerables, when a noble disciple understands nutriment, its origin, its cessation, and the practice which leads to its cessation in this way, then having completely abandoned the subconscious tendency towards passion, as before, again leading to full enlightenment. So I spoke at length about nutriment yesterday, so I'm not going to go into another explanation on it today. But one thing I do want to emphasize here is there's this really fascinating line where Venerable Sariputta says, from the arising of craving, there is the arising of nutriment. From the cessation of craving, there is the cessation of nutriment. So this is the opposite of how we normally think about it. We normally think, when I walk in the kitchen and I see the lemon cake on the counter, then craving arises. So we think that first there is nutriment and then there is craving because of the nutriment. We think there is food, therefore we have craving for food. There is sense contact, therefore we have craving for sensations, and so on. But in the suttas, we see quite a different perspective. Because we have craving, then we experience nutriment. Doesn't that change the picture a bit? And if there's no craving, then there's no experience of nutriment. There's no experience of food. There's no experience of intake, of consuming things. Isn't that something to ponder? Okay. Excellent, Venerable. After delighting and rejoicing in his speech, they asked Venerable Sariputta a further question. But Venerable, can there be another way that a noble disciple has right perspective, and so on? And he says, there can be. When a noble disciple understands dissatisfaction, that's dukkha. So when a noble disciple understands dukkha, the origin of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the practice which leads to the cessation of dukkha, this is how a noble disciple has right perspective, and so on. But what is dukkha, its origin, its cessation, and the practice which leads to the cessation of dukkha? And he says, birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, dying is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, depression, and anguish are dukkha. Not getting what one wants is dukkha. Briefly, the five aggregates when affected by clinging are dukkha. Venerables, this is called dukkha. So a pretty standard explanation of dukkha, of the First Noble Truth. So one thing I would point out is the word translated here as aging in Pali is jara, which more literally means decay or decrepitude. So it's not just aging in the sense of getting older, but rather in the sense of decaying, the loss of one's abilities, the weakening of the body, the weakening of the mind. This is what jara means. Just getting older, no big deal. But feeling your body and mind slowly decaying, that's dukkha. I also find not getting what one wants is dukkha. Well, I think we can all relate to that because so often we don't get what we want. But as Ajahn Amaro likes to say, there's two kinds of dukkha. The dukkha of not getting what you want and the dukkha of getting what you want. So also when we get what we want, we still experience dukkha. And why is that? Well, one is because then we just start wanting something else. But two is because once we get what we want, we're still dissatisfied. Maybe we like it for a minute, but then we're like, there's better things in the world. There's more that's worth getting. This didn't solve all my problems after all. The lemon cake was good, but I'm still grumpy. So clearly that didn't solve everything. And the 5 aggregates when affected by clinging. So that's Panchupadana Kanda, which again I've spoken about in detail fairly recently. So I won't go through a detailed explanation again. Briefly speaking, the 5 aspects of body and mind. When affected by grasping, when grasping is involved, are dukkha. And Venerables, what is the origin of dukkha? That craving which is productive of further existence is accompanied by delight and passion and seeks delight in various ways. That is, craving for sensuality, craving for existence, and craving for avoiding existence. Venerables, this is called the origin of dukkha. Again, a standard explanation of the origin of dukkha. Dukkha comes from craving. Craving is the source of all dukkha. We want things, therefore we suffer. It's really as simple as that. We try to dress it up in all kinds of fancy ways, but this is really what it boils down to. So no, it's not your roommate that makes you suffer, believe it or not. It's not your roommate, that's the problem. It's not the weather, that's the problem. It's not the food, that's the problem. It's not the cat, that's the problem. It's you. It's your craving, that's the problem. That's what's causing all the dukkha. Kind of hard to get around this one. In fact, you can't get around it. We can just pretend that's not the way things are. We can't get around it. It's described as the craving which leads to further existence. So in Pali, that's pono bhavika, which means productive of more being, more becoming, more existence. So in other words, this is also pointing to the fact that craving keeps us spinning in the cycle of birth and rebirth, spinning in the cycle of samsara, continually wandering from one state of being to another, continually wandering from one life to another. So we're constantly trying to find delight in all kinds of various ways, thinking, oh, well, if I get that sensual experience, then that will delight me. If I get that state of being, then that will delight me. If I can just avoid that other state of being, then I'll experience delight. So constantly chasing that which we can never reach. This is why we keep running around in circles in samsara. We're trying to catch that which we can't reach. It's like the carrot in front of the donkey. The donkey keeps walking towards something it can never get. And he continues, and what is the cessation of dukkha? The remainderless fading away, cessation, giving up, relinquishment, and release of that craving without any further attachment to it. Venerables, this is called the cessation of dukkha. So these days I would translate fading away here, which is a translation of viraga. These days I would just leave viraga as dispassion. As I explained yesterday, viraga literally means dispassion. And as the years have gone by and I've done more and more translation, I've become increasingly skeptical of the custom of sometimes translating this word as fading away. Again, I've become quite doubtful that that's actually the meaning of the word, because every place I see it, it translates perfectly fine as dispassion. Let me see exactly what the Pali says. Yeah, the Pali, once again, it's asesa viraga nirodha, exactly the same term that we saw yesterday. So remainderless cessation through dispassion. So here again, it makes perfect sense. How do we let go of craving? Through dispassion. Through cultivating dispassion, then craving disappears entirely. So once again, it makes perfect sense to translate viraga as dispassion. So through dispassion, one's craving completely ceases. One gives up one's craving. One relinquishes one's craving. One lets go of craving. And then one can finally realize true happiness, the complete cessation of dukkha. And this is done through practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, as Sammādiṭṭhi says, which starts with right view, Sammādiṭṭhi, and goes through right intention, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, which is explained in detail in other suttas, but not at this place. So we'll keep moving on. So the monks ask Venerable Sariputta another question. But Venerable, can there be another way that a noble disciple has right perspective? Upright perspective is possessed of certainty and confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And he replies, there can be, Venerables. When a noble disciple understands aging and dying, understands the origin of aging and dying, understands the cessation of aging and dying, and understands the practice which leads to the cessation of aging and dying, this, Venerables, is how a noble disciple has right perspective. He says, but what is aging and dying? Its origin, its cessation, and the practice which leads to its cessation. So once again, the word aging is dara, which means decay. So that's how I would translate this word these days. And he says, the decay, decrepitude, broken teeth, gray hair, and wrinkled skin of those beings amidst a group of beings, the dwindling of vitality, the weakening of one's faculties. Venerables, this is called aging. So once again, emphasizing that this is talking about decay, the loss of one's physical and mental strength over time. And Venerables, what is dying? The falling, shifting away, dissolution, disappearance, mortality, and dying of those beings from a group of beings, the completion of the lifetime, the dissolution of the aggregates, the laying down of the body, the severance of the life faculty. Venerables, this is called dying. Thus, that is aging and that is dying. Venerables, this is called aging and dying. From the arising of birth, there is the arising of aging and dying. From the cessation of birth, there's the cessation of aging and dying. And it is just this Noble Eightfold Path that is the practice which leads to the cessation of aging and dying. That is, right perspective, right intention, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So now we're starting to get into dependent origination, which Sariputta is going to be on for a little while here. But first off, looking at this initial part, again, first he describes decay and dying. And then he says quite simply that it is because of birth that we experience aging and dying. And if there's no birth, then there's no aging and dying. So this is what Bhante Ji calls a buy one, get one free deal. Buy one birth, get one death. It's a package deal. Comes together. It's inescapable. Because of our craving and delusion, we've chosen to be born in this world. Therefore, we experience decay and death. It's inescapable. If you're born, then you're going to die. And you're going to experience a lot of dukkha along the way, too. It's completely inescapable. Unless we follow the Noble Eightfold Path in order to overcome our bizarre obsession with birth and death, our bizarre obsession with dukkha. So then they ask again, is there another way one has right perspective? And he says, yes, when a noble disciple understands birth, its origin, its cessation, and the practice which leads to its cessation. And he says, what is birth? And so on. Says the birth, appearance, descent, or production of those beings amidst a group of beings. The manifestation of the aggregates, the acquisition of the sense basis. Venerables, this is called birth. From the arising of existence, there's the arising of birth. From the cessation of existence, there's the cessation of birth. And it is just this Noble Eightfold Path that is the practice which leads to the cessation of birth. That is right perspective, etc. So here he's continuing with his description of dependent origination. So this is the step of bhava-paccaya jati. So from bhava, from existence, there is birth. As I've explained elsewhere, so bhava, here it's translated as existence. Elsewhere you'll see it translated as being or becoming. But what it appears to specifically mean is ego existence, or the appearance of independent self-existence. So it's this full-fledged concept of me, this full-fledged concept of I am this. This is me. I have these traits and qualities and characteristics. This is who I am. So it's the arising of that full-fledged conceit of self, the full-fledged self-identity, self-concept. So bhava you'll sometimes see translated as ego existence or self-being. And this is the direct cause of rebirth. It's the direct cause of keeping us continually cycling through samsara. It's the direct cause of dukkha. It's the direct impediment to awakening. So in Buddhism, we're trying to overcome this, to let go of our self-identity, our self-conceit, our obsession with me, so that we can finally be free of the cycle of dukkha, the cycle of birth and death. Birth, dukkha, death, birth, dukkha, death, birth, dukkha, death. And at some point we're like, wait a minute, this kind of sucks. What am I doing to myself? Then we practice Buddhism and we break free of it. Or we practice Buddhism but not sufficiently hard, and then we just keep going, birth, dukkha, death, and we forget about Buddhism for a while. And then 100 eons or so later, then we come across Buddhism again and we're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm still doing this whole birth, dukkha, death thing. Maybe I should stop. And we practice Buddhism, but not hard enough. And we get right back in the cycle. Birth, dukkha, death, birth, dukkha, death, birth, dukkha, death. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And we've been doing this for longer than we can possibly remember. Something I like to reflect every now and then when I start to get lazy in my practice is I reflect. How many times have I encountered Buddhism and practiced Buddhism, but not with sufficient sincerity and diligence to attain stream entry, which means that I just backslid and fell back in my old patterns and forgot about Buddhism and continued in the cycle of samsara? How many times have I been one step away from stream entry, but didn't quite push myself enough and lost my chance? How many times has this happened? And the answer is simple. Countless times. More times than we can count. If we had a droplet of water for every time we almost attained stream entry but didn't quite make it, it would be more than would fill all the oceans in the world. If we had a grain of sand for every time we almost attained stream entry but not quite, it would be enough to fill all the beaches in the world and more. Fun times, isn't it? Let's try to do better this life around. Okay, and then they say, but is there another way one has right view? And he says, yes, And he continues with his explanation of dependent origination. He says, when one understands existence, its origin, its cessation, and the practice which leads to its cessation. But what is existence? And he says, Venerables, there are these three kinds of existence: sensual existence, material existence, and immaterial existence. From the arising of attachment, there is the arising of existence. From the cessation of attachment, there is the cessation of existence. And it is just this Noble Eightfold Path that is the practice which leads to the cessation of existence. So, again, the three kinds of existence. So sensual existence is the forms of existence which are sensual, which are connected with sensuality. So this includes the human realm and the higher of the unpleasant realms, such as humans and such as animals and ghosts, and the lower of the pleasant realms, the lower of the heaven realms. So the earth devas, the asuras, the sensual devas, so Tusita devas, Tavatimsa devas, and so on. The realm of material existence, so Rupa Bhava, this is usually defined as being the intermediate heaven realms, like the Brahma worlds, where they have a certain amount of physicality, but it's extremely subtle and refined. So that is considered to be the fine material plane, the subtle material plane. And then immaterial existence is the very highest of the heaven realms, where one has no physical body at all. So one is only mind, mind only deva. So it used to be whenever I said the phrase mind only deva, I assume I would get this huge smile, but not this time. So progress. Craving for immaterial existence has faded away, apparently. Yeah, so all three of these kinds of existence are just different ways of trapping ourselves in samsara. So whether we want to be a sensual being, or whether we want to be a subtle being, or whether we want to be an immaterial being, it doesn't matter. It's all just, I want to be something. I want to be this. I want to be that. And that means we're stuck in samsara. We're always stuck in one fragment or piece of samsara. As long as we're stuck in some piece of samsara, then we're not free of it. We'll just keep cycling through dukkha after dukkha after dukkha. Birth, dukkha, death, repeat. So at this point, it's getting close to 9. So it might be time to go ahead and switch to Q&A. Buddhistically, by the way, he just continues for most of the rest of the sutta is continuing on dependent origination. So there's a little preview. But still, I think at this time we should switch to Q&A and we'll finish up the sutta tomorrow. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Bhante, for leading us through this incredible sutta. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Lots of Dhamma Sukha in my mind. And let's see what our friends are sharing. Kevin says, yes, I buy that. On the food topic, most of my craving stems from the mind alone. An image or thought of a particular food arises in my mind, followed by the overt craving from the latent craving. I guess I should say all craving, not some. I meant to emphasize the notable craving in the absence of any sense object. And then he asks a question. Bhante, curious, what's the Pali word for your translation of subconscious in the sutta? And are there other meanings translations for it?
I think I was translating that anusaya. Yeah, the Pali word is anusaya, which is usually it's translated as underlying tendency, or sometimes just as tendency. Subconscious tendency, yeah, just a slight variation on the translation underlying tendency. Yeah. I think just translating it tendency is also fine. Yeah. Yeah, anusaya. Now, if you look up the word anusaya, Anusaya, you'll find a lot on the subject. It's one of those polytechnical terms which people like to talk about. Okay.
Thank you. And Buddharuchi, so Michael says, beautiful. That's indeed what causes all the dukkha. Intellectually, my mind got it, but my gut brain often doesn't. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's what we're engaged in Buddhist practice. So we get the intellectual understanding of the Dhamma, but then we discover that our sub-intellectual mind is still functioning like an animal. So we have to train it the way you train an animal. So you can sit down with your cat and very peacefully, logically and rationally explain to your cat why it shouldn't be jumping on the table and eating your food. And the cat will sit there patiently, or possibly not. But eventually it's just going to jump on the table. It's not going to understand. So you have to train an animal not to jump on the table. It's the same with your mind. You can gently explain to your subconscious mind all about dukkha and the origin of dukkha and all that. And then your subconscious mind will just be like, that's nice. Ooh, cookies. I want some cookies. So it takes training. That's why Buddhist practice takes so long and is so difficult and time consuming, because we have to train our subconscious mind to stop being so irrational.
Right. And Marielle is very much amused by the package deal. And she says, so we are born in this world because we want to. It's not simple karma, but a deep desire to get things which only exist by living.
Actually, yeah, fundamentally, the reason why we continue to be born into this world and other worlds, fundamentally, it's because of craving for ongoing existence. That's the core driving cause of continued existence. It's craving for continued existence. That's basically what it comes down to. And craving for continued existence is based upon the delusion of self-existence. So that's even more foundational, the delusion of self-existence. We think that we exist in the first place. So then we want to continue existing. And then from that comes all the subsidiary forms of craving. So craving for particular things, craving for particular experiences. But that's all secondary. So yeah, this is what drives us. So karma decides the specifics. What kind of continued existence we have is determined by our karma. But the fact that we have continued existence is because of our, 1, delusion of self, and 2, craving for continued existence. That's what keeps us going. Okay?
Beautiful. All right, and Yanni says, sometimes I have to listen to friends' frivolous prattle. Should I avoid
That sounds like a familiar experience.
Should I avoid this? I did that from time to time, but I have no idea that the frivolous prattle is unwholesome.
Well, if you're not actively engaging in and fueling the frivolous prattle, then it's not such a big deal. As for listening to other people's chatter, there actually is a place for that. There's a place for kindness. So kindly listening to another person rambling on about what they want to ramble on about. So this is something, in my case, it comes up with family members. So I make some effort to maintain friendly communication with my family members, but they're always talking about things that I'm not remotely interested in. But still, I listen because it makes them happy that I'm listening to them chatter on about whatever it is important to them. So it's the same. Sometimes you let somebody chatter and you pay attention to them, just as an act of kindness. As I was talking about yesterday in the talk on giving, it's giving someone your attention, giving someone your time. Because sometimes that's all someone really wants. They just want someone who will listen to them and pay attention to them. So your practice then is to, 1, be patient, 2, not get wrapped up in what they're saying because you recognize that it's unimportant. And then you can also try to subtly turn the conversation towards something more meaningful. So maybe somebody's rambling on about a TV show that they like or a book that they read. Then you can listen for elements of the Dhamma in what they're saying, or ways to introduce elements of Dhamma. Like maybe they're telling you about how a character in the story did something silly and it made them miserable. And you could be like, you can see here how that person is creating their own suffering through their desires and delusions. So you can start subtly wrapping in Dhamma into the frivolous conversation. Okay.
All right. And can you explain what the mind-only deva is?
Yeah, so these are devas who do not have physical bodies. They only have mind. So of the 5 khandas, they only have the 4 mental khandas. They don't have rupa khanda. They don't have the body khanda. They just have vedana, sanya, sankhara, and vijnana. But they do not have rupa. Yeah, so this includes the very highest deva realms, as I mentioned. And these are devas who live exceptionally long lives, and it's very peaceful and pleasant. But it's, of course, not the end of dukkha. It's just another station in samsara. There's some debate as to whether it also includes the pure abodes. I'm personally of the opinion that it does, but there's others who have other opinions on that. And then finally, there's this odd category, which is the asanyi deva, the impercipient devas, the devas sometimes called the unconscious devas or the sleeping devas. So these are devas who are basically asleep for their entire life, which for some people, that's exactly what for them is heaven. Heaven is being able to just sleep continuously. So some people also classify that among the immaterial abodes. Again, it's not clearly stated in the suttas anywhere, but so I don't have an opinion on that one.
The devas are having a break.
Yeah. Anyway, just to briefly speak about why I include the pure abodes with the immaterial realm, it's because the Buddha, if you look at how the Buddha explains things, he often puts it into very neat categorized lists, which are mathematically balanced. So there are 10 sensual realms, 10 fine material realms, and 10 immaterial realms. It actually balances out perfectly, as long as the pure abodes are classified with the immaterial realms. Balances out perfectly. 3 sets of 10. 30 realms in total. Okay?
All right. And Kevin says, pre my Buddhist practice, I used to find comfort in death, especially when depressed, overwhelmed, etc. But now with the acceptance of rebirth, that old idea brings zero comfort, but does motivate. Kevin always reminds me of myself. And same experience.
Yeah, death is kind of like restarting your computer. So it's like your computer has a bunch of viruses on it and bad data and corrupted hard drives. So you restart it and you're like, yes, fresh start. But then it boots up and the viruses start running and the hard drive is still corrupted and there's still lots of bad data. That hasn't changed. So you think you're getting a fresh start, but you're not. Yeah, so death changes some things. Again, like restarting your computer, it's going to change some things. But the basic problems are still there. The basic problems haven't gone away. They just manifest in a slightly different way, perhaps, but the basic problems are still there.
Yeah, and then with rebirth, you're like, oh, dear, I have to do this all over again. Ah.
Well, and then there's the whole amnesia problem. People have this tendency to forget their past lives very quickly. Usually children can remember their past lives, at least vaguely, but within a few years after birth, they forget. Yeah, it's very common. Like children who are 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, often they'll tell stories about their past lives. And if you're in a culture which believes in past lives, then parents will often recognize that that's what their children are doing. They'll be like, the child is like, oh, so I used to be such and such, and my name was John, and I did this and I did that. And the parents are like, oh, that's very sweet. I'm sure you did. If you're in a culture which doesn't believe in rebirth, then they'll just say, oh, how cute. My child has a great imagination. But it's very common. It's very common for young children to remember their past lives. Anyway.
You lie. You only live infinite times. Jans says, Bante, how should we examine greed, hatred, or delusion in unwholesome states? Sometimes I feel if I pay attention to the unwholesome state, it reinforces it. So I really avoid looking at it. So I avoid really looking at it.
Well, it's important when looking at unwholesome states to look at the dukkha that accompanies the unwholesome states. This is very important. Because if we just look at the unwholesome state, then we often get lost in our justifications for why we're doing it. Or we just tolerate it, or we accept it, or we just say there's nothing we can do about it. We always come up with excuses. So it's important to pay attention to the dukkha. So when we're in any kind of unwholesome state of mind, notice that it's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable, and notice that it's optional. It's something that we're doing, which means it's something we can stop doing. So it's really important. The Buddha spoke about paying attention to the drawback. So notice the dukkha, and then we don't get caught. Okay?
And Bradley is sharing, I heard one teacher encourage us to examine what happens when we get what we want, to look at whether we think our craving is satisfied because we get what we wanted, or whether we're feeling relief because the craving has now dropped. And so to look at how we can get the same sort of relief by just dropping craving rather than getting what we want. I think that was Bhante Sutta.
Yeah, I say similar things from time to time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great advice. I don't know who that person was, but I definitely approve.
Because he says the same thing, so that's that was easy. And Sally's saying, is staying at a place we want to run away actually better than always avoiding that place? Because a bad memory of a place, I have been avoiding that place until today. But I realized your avoidance, to truly avoid the bad feeling, guilty, shame, memory is to face it and let it go in my mind. But it's so rooted, I'm not sure I can overcome it or not.
Of course you can overcome it. It might be difficult, it might be challenging, but of course you can overcome it. Yeah, so try. You can't just run away from your problems all the time. So of course, if a place is genuinely dangerous, then that's a different story. But if we're just avoiding it because it brings up unpleasant memories, well, at some point we're going to need to face that and get over that. To face those unpleasant memories and accept that it's just a story in our mind. It doesn't need to bother us. Okay.
And Michael says, in a superficial sense, I get the feeling that right view in the true sense is to be enlightened, as though to achieve right view is to achieve the path. Or in still other words, right view is knowing the true nature of existence, being the world.
Yeah, on its deepest level, that's true. The only people who have fully perfected right view are enlightened beings. So we're trying to develop right view. So an ordinary unenlightened person has 0% right view. A fully enlightened being has 100% right view. Someone who's practicing the path is somewhere between 1% and 99%. So we're just trying to increase our percentage. Just make sure that number keeps going up and doesn't go down.
And Bradley is asking, are there body-only devas?
No.
Nice try, Bradley.
Yeah.
Bradley, I'm laughing.
Yeah, those are called plants. So plants have bodies but no minds. And you cannot be reborn as a plant. So that isn't an option, sorry.
And Yasmin is asking, how do we avoid doing things simply for the building of good karma? I'm concerned about creating a craving for good karma accumulation. To be more exact, how do we purify our intentions when conducting generosity and wholesome acts rather than just do them because it creates good karma?
So there's an interesting sutta where the Buddha says, monks, do not be afraid of merit. It's another word for happiness.
Aww.
So don't be afraid of making good karma. There's nothing wrong with it. But keep in mind that your ultimate goal is enlightenment. And that the merit that you accumulate on the way to enlightenment will help to smooth your path. It'll help to make things easier. It'll help to make sure that you always have supportive conditions and good circumstances. But don't be afraid of merit. Nothing wrong with it. Just keep in mind that your goal is enlightenment.
Beautiful. And Sally says, thank you, Bhante, for your teaching. My question above is because Bhante taught it's craving that we actually want to be or don't want something, not the problem of the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so be willing to face the place and face the traumatic memories and get through it. And you'll be much happier as a result.
And Mariella is really tripped out by the devas. So she says, so we could be walking in a forest and do something that by mistake wakes up a sleeping Veda?
Theoretically, yeah. Yeah. No, there's devas everywhere. Most people aren't particularly good at seeing them or communicating with them, but there's devas everywhere.
Maybe it's devas she's talking to when she talks to the plants.
That's actually my theory, that people who think that plants are sentient, it's because they're communicating with devas who live in the area.
I can totally see you communicating with devas, Marielle.
So actually, this is something which was present in European religions prior to Christianity. The idea that there were devas who lived in the trees, devas who lived in the lakes, devas who lived pretty much everywhere in nature. And this is something which you still see in a lot of animist religions around the world to this day. Just kind of lost its place in Eurocentric religions, but it's still present in many other religions.
And Sally says, how to have confidence and faith in myself and Dhamma power that we can overcome whatever obstacles, especially my mental obstacles?
By reflecting on the success you've had in the past. Reflecting on the progress you've made in practicing Dhamma in the past. No matter how slight or minor, if you've made even a little bit of progress through practicing Dhamma, then you know that you can make as much progress as you want if you apply the sufficient methods and the sufficient effort.
Right, and that was the last question, right on the dot, 9 a.m. Thank you so much, Bhante, for tirelessly teaching the Dhamma. What a wonderful thing, what a wonderful gift. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we will be meeting again this evening for our second episode on the Parami. I said it right. I always say Parami instead of Parami. And Bhante always corrects me. So this time I remembered correctly. So the second Parami this evening, which I believe is truthfulness, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And there will either be Abante or Anaya talking about truthfulness. We'll only find out at 7:30 p.m. on BNN, the Buddhist National Network. So see you in less than 12 hours. And then tomorrow we will go through the second part of this incredible sutta that produces much Dhammasukha. It's wonderful. Thank you all for teaching with us. Mariana is amused. All right. Well, have a great and see you soon. Sadhu. Sadhu. Sadhu.